Were you born a hero, or were you bit by a radioactive spider that made you wanted to get into product and packaging and stuff? Or, did you start in a job and eventually move to become an entrepreneur? Basically, where'd you come from?
Yeah, you know what? So it's probably a bunch of adventurous steps and missteps and learning and growing. I've always had a passion to invent, right? To look for ways to do things, to solve problems. And that's really where I get joy and get energy out of. And as a kid, I consider myself a recovering IT guy and operations person. And I started my career as a developer and working in IT, and then got into project management and process deployment and operations management. And through that journey, I always found ways to invent internally in terms of different solutions. But then externally, while I'm in the corporate world, I'm always looking at different opportunities. And that led me to go on different adventures. And
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell. From the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored: the entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to the Hero Show. My name, of course, is Richard Matthews. Today, I have the pleasure of having on the line Phil Odella. Phil, are you there?
I am here. Yes. Hi, Richard.
Awesome. Glad to have you here, Phil. And I know we always like to start off. Where are you calling in from?
Yeah, I'm calling from outside of Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon. And now I've only been there a couple of times, and it was in late fall, so it was really cold. What's it like this time of year, middle of summer? Is it actually like warm there?
It is going back and forth. It's been warm and it's going to be in the 80s later on this week. It just so happened, however, that this last weekend a storm came in and it's in the 50s and raining. But
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
hope on the horizon. It'll
I've heard
get
that
nice.
Portland is one of those places that it rains more than it sunshines.
You know what's funny is it does for a part of the year, but as soon as you get to late June, there's almost as if a light switch flips and it goes completely dry until October-ish, mid-October, and then that switch gets flipped again and the rain comes and
Yeah,
it
that's when
feels
we were
like it.
there. We were there during Halloween one year.
Yes.
And yeah, and it was almost like it was bipolar. It was like 80 degrees or raining and nothing in between.
Yeah, that's exactly. And people say it and it's fun. I've only been here about 8 years. And what I was told when I moved here is July 4th is when the switch gets flipped and it goes dry. And Halloween is when the switch gets flipped the other way and it gets wet again. And it's within a couple days, but it almost always lines up to about that. So.
Awesome. So what I want to do before we get too far in the interview is read a short bio that let our listeners know who you are. So Phil is the co-owner of Inspired Results Incorporated, which is a sustainable product firm based in Portland, Oregon. He's got a background in operations, finance, and technology, including 8 years internationally in 3 different countries. His passion is for invention and looking at the big picture to find solutions that may not otherwise be obvious. Phil and his wife have 2 sets of twins in high school, and he enjoys travel, golf, food, music, the outdoors, and is always up for an adventure, which is, I don't know if I mentioned this before we got on the call. My wife and I are full-time travelers. We've been on the road for 7 years as of a few days ago, and we had our last child actually on the road. So the whole adventure thing is hardcore for us.
Oh, that is fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Right. And you never know. You got to go for it and you live and learn as you go. So that's
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
So 2 sets of twins in high school. We also have 4 kids, but they're all spread apart by several years.
Fraternal. So I have two sets of daughters who are just graduating from high school later this week, and then I have fraternal twins who are boy girl who are sophomores. So they'll be going into their junior year next year. So it's I get a lot of hard time about my operations background and how it's about operational efficiency and getting all the kids in and over and through at the same time. But
I
it's
wonder if
been great.
there's something to that, because I have 4 kids as well, and when you probably know this because you have 4 kids. 4 kids means that you always have like 7 to 9 kids at your house, especially as
Yes.
they start getting older. So you get really good at the operational stuff, and that's actually one of the strengths of our company too, is the operations side. Something about family makes you good at operations, especially the big families.
Yes, Absolutely right. Absolutely right. So yeah, it's been great, and we're at kind of key, I would say key peak chaos at the moment with four high schoolers, and then I keep telling myself we're going to move into a new chapter at some point, but not sure when that is. So it'll be good.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
great though.
I've only got one who's starting high school, and the rest of mine are little. So I got like 10, 7, and 5. So I mean, they're their own type of chaos, but it's more like chaos with Legos and blocks and whatnot. Um, so,
Yes. Yeah. So
so
that's great.
let's start off with what you're known for then, right? This question really sets up who you are now. What's your business like? Who do you serve? What do you do for them?
Yeah, so we are enterprise level print, promotional product, packaging, distribution company, really known for our partnership. And so our mission is a one word mission statement of partnership. And I like to think about it as transparent partnership is really the key piece with that. And it's just part of what I define as a key value that you get from us, and that is dealing with reality. And we like to talk about where we are. We like to talk about what's working, what's not working, and how we can make it better.
Yeah.
And so from our company side, it's really about that, engaging with the key clients need and helping to push that forward.
So I've had a lot of experience in like the e-com and physical product space, right? Helped build an e-com company up to a couple $1 million in sales per year. We were selling candles and fuels and stuff. Had a lot of packaging that went into that, and like
Sure.
product inserts and things. Also did a supplement company that we sold close to 50, $60,000 of units every month, and there was packaging involved in that. And one of the things that I found really interesting was we were actually white labeling an existing product, and
Mm.
the existing product could be purchased on Amazon for a third of what we were selling it for, and the only major difference was our packaging and how we presented it to the market. And so I'm curious, where in those sort of like things, where does your company fit? What do you guys actually help someone like us do?
Yeah, so and there's a couple different pieces with that, right? There's certainly from a promotion side and branded merchandise for clients that want to give away either to employees or their clients
Like
or at
swag?
event swag, right? we
Yeah.
can we can work with them to actually put some of that custom packaging. And what we all know is the packaging and the presentation can have such an impact on when we receive a product, when we're opening it, and the look and the feel, right? It's all the time and energy that an Apple will spend in designing that box
Mhm.
and how it comes. So that's a really key piece of when we're working with clients from a brand side, and how do we make sure that they have that brand impact that they want to as they're working it. On the other side, frankly, it's more of a commercial. So we work with a lot of healthcare companies. We'll work with pharmacies who are doing shipments to the end consumers as they're receiving a mail order prescription, as an example. And so part of that is less about, obviously, not about branding and all that. It's about safety, security, and that's really where we then also get into sustainability. And when we start to think about the brand impact of someone receiving a package that's either not sustainable, wrapped clumsily, product not protected, that's where we start to step in and we try to help be the advisor for our clients to say, what are we trying to optimize for, and how do we make this work best for you, but also your end client and the people that are
Yeah, yeah.
receiving it.
So do you guys also work with companies who want just and I don't even know how to phrase this exactly, but you're creating a product that you sell online or you sell in person. You want to have the experience of that product, not just be the product itself, but the actual like opening of that product and the way that the box works and the way that it's presented in the box and all that kind of stuff, so that you can have that more premium feel, like the premium cardboards or the premium, like, I don't know, the tabs that you use to lock the box down and all that stuff. I don't know what any of those things are called, but like that's what you guys help companies with.
We will, and our real value, our real role is in the sourcing, the distribution. We'll do kitting when we bring these components. When we have a design need like that, we're typically going to be working with our different partners. And one of the benefits of our model as being a distributor as opposed to a producer or manufacturer ourselves is we're constantly on the lookout for the best products, the most high impact, and trying to match up our client needs with what the different offerings are. And so that it gives us a little bit of that agility to help really find the best fit solution, not try to make our product fit a niche that's maybe not natural for it or isn't the optimal solution
Yeah, it
for a
makes a lot of
challenge.
sense. So let's talk then about your origin story, right? Every good comic book hero has an origin story. It's the thing that made them into the hero they are today. And we want to hear that story. Were you born a hero, or were you bit by a radioactive spider that made you wanted to get into product and packaging and stuff? Or, did you start in a job and eventually move to become an entrepreneur? Basically, where'd you come from?
Yeah, you know what? So it's probably a bunch of adventurous steps and missteps and learning and growing. I've always had a passion to invent, right? To look for ways to do things, to solve problems. And that's really where I get joy and get energy out of. And as a kid, I consider myself a recovering IT guy and operations person. And I started my career as a developer and working in IT, and then got into project management and process deployment and operations management. And through that journey, I always found ways to invent internally in terms of different solutions. But then externally, while I'm in the corporate world, I'm always looking at different opportunities. And that led me to go on different adventures. And so, as you referenced in my kind of the opening bio, I had a chance to have three different international assignments in different countries, and always took those on as an exciting opportunity to get uncomfortable, to really learn and jump into a new culture. Typically didn't know the language, typically didn't, understand a lot of the cultural nuance before I got there, but come in with a humble spirit and a curiosity to be listening and learning and try to grow as we go. So that's kind of led me down different paths as I start to see different opportunity. And as my current business partner says, part of my issue is I see an opportunity in every corner. So
You're full of
that
entrepreneurs.
discipline of, yes, right. That discipline of picking and choosing and really prioritization and where to spend time and energy is one of my key pieces of focus. Otherwise, I can run off and get excited about lots of different things.
So when did you guys start this company?
So interestingly, so my business partner and I worked doing merger and acquisition work, working for a large company, and our role was to acquire companies like ours now. And so we worked together for about 3 years, acquiring these entities, traveling around the country. But myself, with four young children based in Atlanta, my business partner with three children based in Phoenix, after a couple years, just got tired of it. And when we were looking at and looking under the cover and working with so many of these small businesses, we just said, you know what, we can do this. So we put our heads together in 2015, formed a company, and then acquired three of these entities that we had previously worked to transact for the bigger company that we had been working for. So since 2015, we've been working on this consolidated entity, has subsequently divested some business and acquired some others to bring it together. But really about bringing together and doing things differently in an industry that, there's a lot of change, but to some extent, there's a lot of history and a lot of baggage and a lot of the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
So my business partner and I are very passionate about changing that and looking at it differently.
So this is a selfish question, but one of the things that we're looking at for our agency is we're really, really good on the operations side, operationally complex business for what we actually deliver as a service. And we're pretty much better than most of our competition. One of the things that I'm looking at is if we hit a certain sort of revenue number, that we can start using acquisition as a way to grow, because we could serve the other clients better than the companies that we would acquire would be. I'm curious your thoughts on a strategy like that for growth, just because it sounds like you've done it.
Yeah, and we've seen it frankly work and seen it not work. The biggest thing for me is when you contemplate a strategy like that is really thinking about the fit and the cultural fit of
Mhm.
individuals. So if you're bringing people over, you're bringing clients over that may have a different expectation or a different perspective on how to do things, you've got to make sure that you are aware of that and honor that when you bring them in. It can be easy to you know I'll say it differently. I think most transactions at the beginning, the first thing everyone says is, don't worry, nothing's going to change. You're going to keep operating the same way you are. But the reality is, that's not why a transaction happens. Transaction happens to actually do things differently, to do things
Yeah, to make
better,
things better,
to
hopefully.
maybe find the synergies and make it better, right? So I think it's looking for those opportunities where you actually can make the difference. And then to the extent there's people involved of coming over or clients, that there's actually that cultural fit as well that goes beyond just what the numbers say and what the growth can look like.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's definitely something we've been chatting a lot about, and I hope to sort of figure out more of it. But yeah, there's been both the discussion internally about acquiring companies that have our exact client base and we can just serve better, but then also acquiring companies that serve, right before our clients' needs and right after our clients' needs so we can make our product offering better and
Yeah.
doing things like that. And there's definitely some strategy involved in trying to figure out how acquisition can be a company growth tool.
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting thing to think about what you're trying to achieve. And I'll give you an
Mm.
example. At one point in our history here, we knew we had some deficiencies in terms of the internal culture we had, and we needed more of a growth mindset. So when we acquired a company, it was actually to inject some of their cultural attributes into our existing entity. It wasn't just to bring them in and our way is the only way. It was actually to learn and inject some of those in there as well. So I think that becomes part of this. The whole is greater than the individual parts.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like you've had an interesting journey to get here. What I want to talk about next is your superpowers that you've developed over that journey, right? Every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's your fancy flying suit made by your genius intellect, or the ability to call down thunder from the sky, or, Superman's famous for his super strength. In the real world, heroes have what I call a zone of genius, which is either a skill or a set of skills that you were born with or you developed over the course of your career that really energize all your other skills. And so the superpower is what sets you apart. It allows you to help your people slay their villains, come out on top in their own journeys. And the way I like to frame it for my guests is if you look at everything that you have developed over the course of your career, there's probably a common thread that ties all those skills together. And that common thread is probably where you find your superpower. So with that, what do you think your superpower is as, one of the founders of Inspired Results?
Inspired results, yes. Yeah, I think the common thread for me is jumping into chaos, jumping into complexity, and finding a way to distill the key problems, the key challenges, the key opportunities, and really find a way to then simplify what are the key levers that we need to drive. And part of my passion is a background in Six Sigma and continuous improvement, and that is this belief that we can always improve and we can always do things better, and finding a way to distill key pieces that can make the biggest difference, and thinking about it from a Pareto perspective, right? What are the 20% of things that we levers we can pull that can drive the 80% of the impact,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
we go through that.
So like that Kaizen sort of idea that you can always make something a little bit better.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it's there's a dangerous flip side to that of believing you can always make it better, and that is you're constantly always trying to make everything better, right? And what we know is true growth, true execution performance requires a semblance of stability as well. And so making sure the trick being knowing when to meddle, when to tweak, and when to let things go. And sometimes slightly sub-optimized process, but running very, very efficiently can work better than introducing the cost of change and the cost of continuous improvement in there as well. So it's counter to my ethos of always wanting to tinker, and that's where the collective working with my business partner and our key leadership in our company is a great checkpoint for me to make sure that we're really focusing on the most important and most impactful items and not just
Yeah.
tinkering into everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that really big because I'm a tinkerer and the same kind of thing, right? One of our core values at our company that we talk about on our meetings is the idea of constant improvement. And we just made a major shift in our operational, like our project management system that basically runs everything. And so we shifted it all over from one to the other, and it was a big improvement in things. And I'm like, I see all these things that we could make even better, but I'm like, nope, we just need to let it sit and simmer for
Yes.
a good long while so everyone can get used to the big change and then that we can get everything, you know, because a big change like that is very rocky. And then, like, once everyone gets used to it, it starts to smooth out. And once it gets smooth, then we can, like, okay, here's a small thing that we can change to improve. Here's a small thing we can change to improve.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Is you've got to let give it time to mature to set in, and that obviously the flip side is again not being complacent and not letting it become too embedded such that the changes are even that much more difficult.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, finding
It's,
that balance is
it's
the
definitely
trick.
an interesting balance of like, how do you constantly improve things without wearing your team out with change?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
and for those of us, like sounds like you and me, who are, obsessed with making things a little bit better all the time. It's
Yes, that is, and the key for me is having some trusted advisors who I trust to give me very clear and direct feedback when it's slow down or not now or we need to think in something else. And that's been my key piece is my business partner and our key leadership is, trusting them and being comfortable and confident that when they say we need to let it simmer for a bit, letting it simmer.
So what I've been doing, I don't know if this is helpful or not, but maybe one of our audience members might find this useful, is when we get a big system change in place, we don't touch it until everything is documented really well. And once everything has good documentation, and we have like levels for our documentation where it's missing, weak, moderate, and strong. And like once all of the SOPs for that process are in a strong situation, and strong for us means that like the process is documented, it has documented screenshots, it has FAQs along with it, it has remedies for things that have gone wrong, and it has a person that's assigned to it to update it every couple of months to make sure that it's still in place. And then like once all the processes are documented well, then we're allowed to work on improving it, because until it's documented well, you may not know that if there's a problem with the process or if there's a problem with expectations of how the process is being used or understood.
Yeah, I love that. And having run many kaizens in a previous life where my role was driving improvement here, what I know to be true is every single time you go through the process of defining what the current state is, everyone walking into the room thinks they know what the current state is, and everyone walking out at the end of that day say, wow, I never really realized that, or I didn't understand when I did this, it had this impact on you downstream. And so I love that idea of that discipline to say we've got to really capture what is and really make sure we understand what's working before we start tweaking and tinkering, because otherwise we're just throwing answers against the wall hoping to find a question,
Yeah.
and right, without really knowing what those problem statements are, then you can work to it,
Yeah,
to
one of the
solve
things I've been talking to my operations manager about is that like if a process is not being followed, what's the waterfall? And so the waterfall is the process not being followed because we haven't defined a process, right? That means we don't have well documented SOPs that are like in place and are there. So that could be the first problem. That's our fault as a company. And then the
yes.
second one is, are the people who are responsible for process aware that the documentation exists? And if that's also like if they aren't aware, that's also our fault as a
Hmm.
company. And then the third stage is like that's what you're going to do if we have a process and everyone is aware of it and has been is there, and then we have a problem. Then the issue can be, is there a problem with the process? Right? Is it not documented well? Or is there something that's an issue with it? Before you get to, okay, all those things are true. Now maybe we have a discipline issue with staff, right? And I think a
Hmm.
lot of companies start with discipline issues with staff without realizing that there's probably at least three stages of it's your fault as a company before you get to the point where it's a problem with your staff.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think there's a maturity in the way you describe that, which is look at yourself first before you're accusing others. Right? Look at yourself and understanding, and ourselves in that case being the
The
management, the
company, right?
ownership,
Yeah.
the leaders of the team, to say, are we, or do we have everything lined up to give people the best opportunity for success, to allow them to best be successful before you start pointing fingers at people
Yeah, yeah.
and throwing accusation.
And I've discovered for operational efficiency, like that sort of an attitude, and like even if you want to pursue Kaizen, you want to pursue that. I'm not familiar with Six Sigma, but I imagine it's similar kind of thing, right? Where you're trying to just constant improvement. You have to have all those things in place before you can work on improvement. At least that's what I've learned over the course of failing through it a bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think also the piece with that when you start with that manner, you open up the dialogue for people to be willing to share opportunities for improvement, to do things differently, to do things better. When you start with just the accusation, you might have a great disciplined person executing exactly as you want, doing the exact wrong things. And they know better, but you don't. And one of the quotes from the continuous improvement trainings, and I'll get it wrong, but the essence of it is that we that these nothing so damaging or nothing so problematic with doing something efficient which should not be done at all. And
Oh
the
yeah.
idea being, right, we can drive efficiency into doing projects or processes and executing things, but if there's not a need for them, or they're wasteful, or they're accomplishing the wrong end, then you need to stop and do something different to begin with. So
Yeah, I love that. I should write that down and stick it on our board.
I've got it written on a wall somewhere. I just don't happen to have it in front of me, and now I'm fumbling through it. But the
So,
essence is making sure you're challenging it.
so
So
you hinted at this a minute ago, but every superpower has their flip side, right? The fatal flaw. And just like every Superman has his kryptonite or Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad, you probably had a flaw that has held you back in your business, something you struggled with. For me, it comes out as a systems person who likes to improve things. It's perfectionism, right? I always make something a little bit better before we ship it, before we put it to market, before we turn it on in an operational side, which a lot of time leads to us never actually doing anything because perfectionism is not a like you can't achieve perfection, so you never ship. So, and I think more important though than what the flaw is, how have you worked to overcome it yourself so you can continue to have success in your growth? Hopefully, sharing a little bit from your experience will help our listeners learn from you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think as I alluded to a little bit ago, I think my biggest challenge is that I see opportunity everywhere. And the challenge with that is not spending enough time and energy to focus and actually be successful and complete a project and get something completed before you're moving on to the next item. The way I've been able to help offset that is, as I said, to surround myself with the right people to be the checkpoint and trusted advisors, people that I know and I can trust to say, okay, yeah, you're right, time out. We should look at this differently. The other piece of that is that accountability to actually finish the execution. And I know as a kid, my father always, drilled into me that if you don't finish it, it's not worth starting.
Yeah.
And, it actually does irritate me significantly when I see a job that gets started and 90% of it gets completed, the final 10% doesn't get accomplished. And I think that's part of what I try to then bring into this environment, which is when there's lots of opportunity everywhere, it's easy to task switch and to jump from one to the next. But if you don't actually get them across the line, it doesn't actually make a big difference. So it turns
Yeah.
into waste. Right.
So that's actually really interesting to me because my weakness as a perfectionist is flipping the switch on things. Right,
Mm,
getting that last 10%, like, I've solved the problem, so I have, like, 2 issues. One is that I wanna make it a little bit better before we actually turn it on, and then the other issue is my interest in solving the problem was in the solving the problem part, and once we've got most of the plan in place, like, I lose interest, I no longer care. So, I have to hire other people who really like finishing and maintaining things because,
absolutely.
like, that's where, like, I know, like, the limit of my I don't know, the things that bring me energy. The
Yes,
yeah,
exactly it.
the
And
finishing things and the maintaining things drain me, and so I'm like, I need to stop here at about 80%, and then I need to give it to someone else who's gonna finish it and turn it live, because I'll never turn it live, and I don't care anymore because I already solved the major part of the problem.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it's funny. So what I got certified a couple years ago, and there's a model, a working genius model that was developed by Patrick Lencioni and the Table Group. And the idea behind it is there's kind of six key stages of work, and they're not about competence. It's about where you get joy and energy.
Yeah,
And it goes from wonder, which is asking questions, to invention, to discernment and making decisions, galvanizing, communicate, which is about communicating, tenacity, or yeah, engagement, and then tenacity, enablement, and then tenacity. The point being, there each person has different areas where you get joy and energy. And what I found as part of this training, and actually the more training I do, the more I learn, is the idea that there are some things I can't stand and get no energy from that actually are the brightest spot in someone else's day. So
yeah,
there are things that I can't even dream of wanting to do that someone else, if I don't give them the opportunity to do that, I'm robbing them of the opportunity to do something they get joy from. And so it's really helped me think about things differently in a both a judgment and guilt for myself, right? There's pieces of even communication when we want to go and tell the good news about a story and get it going. I don't get energy from that. But there, my business partner loves it. That's where she gets so much energy. And so when I think of this idea of, oh, really, do we have to go do this and tell the story? If I don't allow her to do that, I'm robbing her of an opportunity to do what she gets joy from. And at the same time, I get off my plate the thing that I don't get the joy from. And so I really like the idea of looking at where you get joy and energy, not just where you're good at, because there's things we're good at that can suck our energy as well.
yeah,
So
that's a
focus on
really important point. It's something that I learned over the last several years is that skill and energy are 2 different things, and just because you're good at it doesn't mean you should be doing it. There's a lot of things I'm really good at that sap me dry, that make me wanna just go stick my head in the sand and not do work anymore. And then there's other things that I'm really good at that when I do them, I'm lit up. Reminds me of an old quote that says, go and find that which makes you alive, come alive, because the world needs more people who are alive. I can't remember the exact quote, but that's it's very very similar, and it reminds me of something that actually my wife is the person who taught this thing to me, because she is very into things that are repetitive and monotonous. They bring her joy in ways that I just cannot understand. So like, as a really fun example, she does cake decorating. And one of her favorite cake decorating methodologies is something called pointillism, where she takes the little icing bag and she just dot, 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 dot all the way around to make the design of the cake. And so, like a big three-dimensional cake, like she made a T Rex with volcanoes and everything for one of my nephews a couple of years ago. Very cool. But there was probably like 10,000 little dots of icing in different colors on to make the pattern. And I was like, watching her do it makes me want to gouge my eyes out with a spoon.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because I was
But
like,
she gets so much joy and energy, right?
yeah, she gets joy and energy, and I am like, I can't even begin to understand how you manage that kind of thing, because I'm a very problem solver kind of person. I'm like, I learned how to put a dot on the cake. I put one dot on the cake. I'm done. Right? Like,
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think that's the risk. And I try to filter that into when I'm mentoring or coaching or working with either, students or people young in their career, just starting their career, is making sure you get in touch with those things where you get energy, not just going down a path where someone sends you or recommends you go down because you're good at it.
mhm,
And I think that's part of one of the interesting theories I have is coming out of the pandemic. One of the reassessments we're doing in general is where do we get joy and energy, and not necessarily the continuing down a path that maybe we've told we should go down or we're good at, so you should always be doing this function. It's forced us to kind of look at things differently, and I don't view it as a negative. I view it as a, to your point of the quote earlier, like we need more people that are alive. We need more people where they're finding their energy, and when they find it, they get so much joy and they can be so productive and provide a lot of benefit and value. But it's finding that match
yeah,
that's so
yeah.
key.
Are you familiar with Marie Kondo?
I am,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. So you got to
yeah.
like Marie Kondo your tasks in your life, right? What are the ones that bring you joy?
That's exactly. I love that actually. I hadn't connected that in there, but that's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We follow something similar from a minimalist lifestyle, because we travel full time, which means everything we own fits in a 40-foot box that we drive around. So we're very with what gets to stay and what doesn't, and what we have room for and what doesn't. So like either it brings us joy and we use it regularly, or it's not in our life. And so it's really useful to think about the same thing in terms of what's the actual work that you're doing to produce your income, right? And are you doing the things that bring you joy, or are you doing the things that don't bring you joy? And if you're not, there is someone that you can hire for whom that task will bring them the kind of joy that the tasks that bring you joy bring you. And when you find that, that's magical.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that last piece is the key insight because we presume everyone else looks at things the same way we do, and in reality, there are people that love the things that we can't stand.
Yeah,
So finding those right people is the trick.
yeah,
Is the trick.
absolutely. So I
Yeah.
want to switch gears then and talk a little bit about your common enemy, right? Every superhero has an arch nemesis, and it's a thing that they constantly have to fight against in their world. So in the world of business, it takes on a lot of forms, but we like to put it in the context of your clients. And it's a mindset or a flaw that they come to you with that you have to fight to overcome so you can actually get them the result that they came to you for in the first place. So at that sort of like understanding, what is the common enemy in the space that you guys are in?
I think the main one just becomes resorting to pricing and the risk of the products that we sell being just the products as opposed to the overall solution and the idea that we're helping to solve a problem that's bigger than just the individual products we're delivering. And so it's an interesting piece in that the more success we get in a client, typically the more visibility we're getting of that spend and the likelihood that there's a procurement lens that gets looked at in terms of the dollars that are being spent. And so
Yeah.
one of the things we're having to do very intentionally is making sure we're building relationships, but also being able to tell the story of the bigger impact. And that's where the transparency I think I referenced earlier comes into play. We're a huge believer of being transparent with our data, with the information, with our successes and our failures, so that we can help drive this improvement within the client, and not just be about selling more product, selling more product.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, the sum is greater than the parts kind of thing. Like, because if you just count the parts, you're like, "This is our cost," but, like, the actual result for it is bigger than what you put in.
Absolutely. And I think you then have a situation where change becomes attractive because someone can offer you a savings and an economic. And it's easy in those moments to discount the intangible benefits, the process, the relationships, the bigger impact that you can have on a business. And really looking at that data and leveraging the data, leveraging efficiencies, and frankly, the brand impact then as well that you
Yeah.
can have when you're doing it the right way.
So I want to one of the experiences we had with packaging and branding, which was really interesting to me, and it showed how the sum was greater than the individual parts. So we were in the supplement space, and I mentioned that earlier, right? And we were selling something that you could have bought for cheaper, but we built a whole brand around it, and part of it was the packaging, and we had really good packaging, really good design, and we had a really good story that went along with. And so we took that and then we did one other thing on top of it, which was we started telling a brand story to go along with it that had a environmental impact. And the environmental impact was it was actually I don't know if environmental impact is the right word. We were every time we sold a bottle, we were donating a portion of the proceeds to a company that took supplements to children who needed it across the country, right? And so it was vitamin A, for instance, is the leading cause of death for malnutrition in the world for children under I think 10 years old. It's lack of vitamin A. And vitamin A only costs like 25 cents to get someone a year's worth of vitamin A. And so we were doing a buy a bottle, we donate 25 cents to this company, and it was part of the story that went along with it. And so we had a little, it was very simple. It was just some stuff on the packaging and some stuff on the branding and the emails and all the little pieces that went into selling the product. This just said buy a bottle, save a life. And it went and talked about that story. And so we put all those things together and then we played a little bit with price elasticity and realized that we took our product from selling it from $21 and we would just raise the price a dollar every couple of months just to see how it would go. We got all the way to $35 before we started to see a dip in sales. And what was interesting is it stayed consistent until we got to about $33. And when we switched to $34, our sales doubled.
Yeah.
Um, right. And so it's one of those things that, like, when you put all these things together, you realize that, like, not only is the sum greater than its part, sometimes it's multiplicative.
Yes.
Um,
Yes, exactly. And I think people like attaching, I know that people, they like attaching themselves to a story like that, to doing good. And I truly believe at our heart, that's, that people want to be contributing and doing it in a positive way. And to the extent they can find a story like that that resonates with them, there's actually an interesting piece, like you said, when you go that 33 to $34, that there's an authenticity of paying a little bit more that they feel like, okay, this has to be legit. They must really be doing what they said they're doing. If it's the cheapest and they're doing good, you're kind of suspicious of how could that actually be possible. And so that's an interesting story. I love that.
Yeah, it was really fascinating to see how that happened, and, I think there was a lot of pieces that just sort of played into that, everything from, like, triggering free shipping to having a good story that went along with it to having the believability to having the good packaging. It was like it's one of those things that, like, all those things individually, right, the sum is greater than the parts kind of thing, you put them all together and you have massive growth, which is really cool. So, yeah, that's my understanding is essentially you help people create those kind of experiences with their products. Maybe not
We
that
do.
exactly, but things like that.
Yeah, where we try to make sure that the products that we're making available are easy to get, easy to order, have delivered, are very complementary to the brand and tell that brand story that resonate with the brand, and then are obviously cost competitive, but from a value, taken from a perspective of what's the overall value you're getting as opposed to just the pure product price. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. So let's talk about the flip side of that, right? Your driving force, right? So if your common enemy is what you fight against, your driving force is what you fight for. So just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information, I want to know what it is that you fight for with your company, your mission, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. So again, our mission is partnership, and I think about this transparent partnership as our key piece. What we're really helping to drive is impact, and part of what I kind of my purpose is helping people, organizations to solve things, to see things and solve things in a way that they hadn't imagined, so that they can accomplish the things that they have imagined. And often I see that there are artificial barriers that we put up all the time, right? And asking questions, leading people to think differently about a situation, allows us to maybe unlock this opportunity that we didn't even realize was sitting right there in front of us. And then it's also connecting the dots, right? And so making sure that what we're doing in one area of the business doesn't compromise our brand story or doesn't get in the way of other things that we're trying to drive, and make sure that for our clients, they can see the whole picture, and push through. And so it's analytic dashboards. It's making basic data available in a very transparent manner so that we can help make things better, right?
Yeah.
And solve issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things that just popped in my head while you were talking through that is the idea that you can look at what they're imagining and then help them see things that they never even imagined, right? You're like expanding the world of good that they can accomplish.
Yes, yes, unlocking, and I think I'm kind of focused on this artificial barrier thing, and we all have them whether we realize it or not. I was thinking about this today of driving back to the gym this morning, and thinking I had to go a certain route, and there was going to be traffic, and but that's the way I have to go. And all of a sudden, I stopped and said, "Well, wait a second. There's three other ways I can drive." But just because I was in autopilot, feeling like I had to go a certain way, it made me think that there's a I put this artificial barrier that I'm going to have to go through this challenging spot just because that's the way that I normally go. And we see that all the time, right? Or maybe it's my favorite cup. I can't find my favorite cup, and if I can't find my favorite cup, how am I supposed to have a cup of
I
coffee?
can't drink
Right?
water, right?
Right?
Like
I can't drink water. How am I going to get
I'm gonna
water if I
die
don't have
of
my cup?
dehydration.
Right? Well, there's four other ones right next to it that you could probably use instead.
Oh, I'm not sure why, but it reminds me of one of our older episodes on this podcast. Name was Victoria Wick, if someone wants to go back and look it up. But she ran a QVC company. She sold jewelry. And I chatted with her a little bit after we got off the interview because she's really good at selling product. And we were working on that candle company and selling product for that candle company. And so she had a story about candles for me. And she turns the camera around to the side and she has a candle behind her that is, it's like 15 inches across and maybe 40 inches tall. It's got 40 wicks on it. It's a massive candle. And she's telling me a little bit about this candle, and it had to do with like the success in her business and some other things. But she makes roughly like, I think it was something like $500 million in sales she's done. Anyway, very successful. And the candle that she had behind her was a $10,000 candle. I was like, it was a mind expanding moment for me to realize that like I had limits that I didn't think I had limits on. Cause I was like, I can see spending $1 million and receiving a yacht, right? Like that makes sense. But what I can't see is spending $10,000 on a candle and then lighting it on fire.
Yeah. And you just literally burning what you invested in, right?
Just burned it down. And that's its intention. And I was like, oh, there's a level of wealth that I'm not aware of that I don't know how to understand.
Or joy and some impact, right? Some excitement or energy you get out of burning that $10,000. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
fantastic.
I thought it was interesting. And just in terms of like, these artificial limits we put on ourselves and expand your mind, you're like, oh, there's people for whom $10,000 is totally worth lighting on fire.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, that's interesting. So
So, well, I want
yeah,
to talk a little bit about I call this our practical portion of the show. It's the hero's tool belt. And just like every superhero has a tool belt with awesome gadgets like their batarangs or their web slingers or their laser eyes or, their big magical hammer they can spin around and fly with. We talk about the top one or two tools you couldn't live without in your business today. Could be anything from your notepad to your calendar to something you use for marketing to something you use for your actual product delivery, something you think is essential to getting your job done as the founder of your company today.
yeah. I think to some extent it's a crutch, but Excel is where I live, and I do lots of modeling and playing, and I actually use it as like a brainstorming tool as well. And so whether it's just thinking about concepts or modeling things out, Excel is probably a place I live. That's a key piece.
I
And
love
then
that.
yeah, I mean it's yeah, the versatility of doing things. And so,
So
that's a key piece.
it reminds me of something. I just started a newsletter. Shameless self plug for that. It's Push Button Nations if anyone wants to check it out. And we started talking about the three things that I think every business needs to have today in order to really, really be good on the operations side. And those three things are a database, an automation platform, and an intelligence platform. And the intelligence could be either AI or human, but you have to have intelligence that runs the other two, right? And what's funny is most of our database design starts in Excel, or in our case, Google Sheets, but same process,
Sure.
because Excel is a fantastic, like, you get to design the database in the forefront kind of thing, and then you can take that data structure and move it into a more databasey application later. But because it's so simple and friendly to people don't even realize they're looking at a database when looking at an Excel sheet, but that's what you're looking at.
Yes.
And so it's a fantastic tool. And it's the kind of thing that, like, if you don't, as a business owner, either yourself or have someone on your team who's really good at database design in Excel, you're missing out big time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we use it in our strategic planning. If I think about a new market and what the opportunities are and what leverage we can get and what investments we need to make, really playing with things and modeling and then looking at data, right, for our clients. I'm in the middle of doing some analysis right now of a sustainable product transition to our for our client. And they have an explicit objectives to move to more sustainable product. They've made new sustainable products available and people aren't buying them at the rate that they would like. So we're in the middle now of again using Excel just as some analysis and analytic and slicing and dicing of the data as a database to then help come up with some of those insights and work with them to think through how actually are we who is the actual person putting the button, making the selection and pushing the button to order? And are they receiving the support and backup and the air cover to make the decision you want them to make, or are they getting beat up because they're ordering something a little more expensive? Point being, we're using Excel as that tool to do the analytics to help them lead to some of those insights around who's making which
Um,
decisions when.
so we run our finances of our company following the Profit First system by Mike McAllowitz. And we
Mm,
have an Excel spreadsheet that tracks all of the Profit First stuff. And one of the things that, so like we have a table for our clients and we have a table for our staff and we have a table for our hours and we have a table that goes through like what our, what our costs of goods are on a service on an hour delivery basis on like just all of this stuff and it all ties together. And one of the
mhm,
things that was really fascinating to me is like as we grow, you trigger different like percentages that go into different accounts, right? And so like as you're smaller, you start off putting a larger percentage into the owner's account and a smaller percentage into operating expenses. And as you grow, that sort of shifts where the owner's percentage gets a little smaller and the gets a little larger. And that was really a struggle for me to understand how that worked until I started modeling it all in Excel and seeing how you get the efficiency of scale reduces your cost of goods because it reduces your cost of labor. It reduces, like, you have economies of scale is a real thing and you don't really understand how that works. But when you, as you expand your team and you expand your resources and you expand all those things, the actual cost of doing business goes down. So actually, everything gets a bit more profitable. So if everything's getting more profitable, you can put more resources into operating expenses and less resources into profit and owner's pay and those kind of things. And from a volume standpoint, you're actually making more money, even though from a percentage standpoint, you're putting less into those categories.
yes.
And so it was Excel that really allowed me to see that and to believe it, and to actually just like push the gas pedal down, so to speak.
Exactly, exactly. And it's often that playing around that becomes the key piece. And like you said, it's you can hear a concept, you can talk about it, maybe even see it, but until you're able to get in there and play around, at least certainly for me, that's how I get comfortable. That's how I digest. That's how I digest concepts. So that's definitely a key one for me. And then I'd probably say my phone, right? And the phone being
The
again, like we
thing we
all
can't live
know, the
without,
good
right?
and yeah, the good and the bad that comes with that, the distraction for sure, but the flexibility that it enables, and again with the family being able to be available when needed to help and engage with the family and support there, but then also being able to have this integrated world where I can be with my family and sometimes I have to deal with a work thing, or I can be at work and sometimes have to deal with a family thing. It enables some of that integrated life that I think is, at least as a business owner, enables me to find the best of everything, right? And
Yeah.
really to balance that.
It's crazy to me because, right, like I'm sitting at my podcast studio desk here, right, and I've got a laptop in front of me, I've got a teleprompter and a camera and a second monitor and lights and a stream deck and a microphone and another camera. There's like $10,000 worth of gear sitting here. Allows me to do some of the things that I do in my business, like work product wise, and then I can step away from my desk and do 80-90% of it with my phone that costs $1,000, 1/10 the cost, right? And I'm happier about it because I'm not sitting at my desk doing work. And so like I actually went through, maybe I can't remember how long I did it for. It was like 4 or 5 months where I was like, I'm not going to use my real computer. Not that this isn't a real computer because it totally is, but I'm not going to use my real computer. I'm only going to use my phone and my tablet because the phone and tablet force you to not do work and force you to manage work instead. And
Yes.
as a someone who's a burgeoning CEO, right, and building a large team and doing all those things, I had to get myself out of the habit of doing things and into the habit of delegating things and building team and building culture, and realizing that a lot of that has to do with how you communicate and what's, those kind of things. And it's a lot more of the things that are better suited to, I can't do much other than communicate on my phone because that's what it is. It's a communication computer.
Sure, sure. I
And
love that. I love that discipline that it forces you to have. It's much easier in the short term to say, "Oh, well, let me just jump in and I'll do it for you, or I'll show you how to do it." But that's not going to build up the skills and the experience and the confidence of your team, so that the next time they can actually do it and come to you and say, "Hey, look, this is what I did. How does that look? Or do you have any feedback?" As opposed to coming to you first. So I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because like, we're a few years into this now, and, like, this last week, I had to take a couple of days off to go help a family that family friend of ours that needed some help, and I could just be like, "Hey, clear my schedule, I'm going away," and they can just handle all those things because 'cause we've built some of that stuff into the team, and now I have the discipline because I sort of taught myself to it, to know when it makes sense for me to sit down at the computer and do work, actual work product versus when it makes sense to be more of the CEO leadership role, and having that separation, I think, and the phone has been really, really key for that, and what's fun is that we mentioned earlier things about the three things every business owner needs, like a database, an automation platform, and intelligence. And one of my favorite new little tricks that I've been doing on my phone now is I'll use the voice memos app, and I'll just talk to it,
Mm,
just like raw data dump ideas. I'm like, here's the thing that I want to get done, or here's an idea I have, or here's something that whatever it is, like CEO type stuff. And
sure.
I've got a little database application on here. I think it's called Collections. And then the iPhone comes with an automation platform called Shortcuts. And I built a little automation that lets me transcribe my voice memos and then uses OpenAI's ChatGPT to analyze what I said and then turn it into whatever output I want, like a task for our Smart Suite thing, or feedback for a vendor, or feedback for a client, or a blog post for our website, or whatever it is. So I can just use my phone to raw data dump the things that I need to get out and then click a couple of buttons and have it turned into work product where I don't have to like sit down at my computer to actually do things. So it's like, man, those couple of tools really, having a phone and being able to like leverage some of these technologies we have available. It's We live in a crazy time.
We do, and I love that story from a number of aspects. Right, it's the discipline of the phone, it's the ability to capture and then use the automation for what it's used for. Right, which intended to, which is to make things quicker and easier and simpler. It's not replacing you and your thoughts. It's actually making your thoughts more powerful, more actionable, more directly able to add value and kind of send them where they need to go, as opposed to be swirling around in your head and you're trying to remember that plus 14 other ones that came up. Right, it's a
Yeah.
quick, easy way to get it
It's
out.
it's super interesting because one of the things I've realized about the modern sort of like language model AIs that we have access to nowadays is it allows us as CEOs to separate the creativity from the work output. Right?
Yes.
And it's really hard for us as humans to do because we think in terms of our work output, right? If you're going to put a task in your task management system, you're thinking, who do I assign it to? What's the description? What's the steps that need to go into it, right? If you're thinking I need to write a blog post, you're like, I need an intro paragraph and like you've got a structure that you're following. If you're taking a picture, you've got a 4x3 frame you're taking a picture inside of. So we're always thinking within the limits of our output. And so we create that way.
Mm,
And what I've found that's been really freeing for me is that because of the AI stuff, I can let the AI handle the structure of the creativity. Like, what do I want to do with it later? And I can just data dump the ideas that I have into a transcript because I don't even have to worry about any of it. Structure, it doesn't have to be in order. Like, there doesn't have to be any sort of, there has
yeah.
to be no structure thought. And I can just the creativity, the spark of divinity, so to speak, into the transcript. And then I can use the automation to be like, okay, now that I've got this all down, I want this to be I want it to be a blog post. I want it to be a transcript for our podcast. I want it to be, a feedback for a vendor. And, we've thought through some of our how we're getting those outputs, but
Hmm.
it just allows us to change those outputs really readily. And it's just leveraging tools that we all have access to already. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Allowing you to be more efficient and more effective at doing what you do best, which is
yeah.
generating those ideas, not having to do the formatting and all the other pieces that can be automated. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
great. That's
I love it.
fantastic story. No, I love it too.
Speaking of heroic tools, I want to take a few minutes to tell you about a tool we built that powers the Hero Show and is now this show's primary sponsor. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. And now, back to the Hero Show.
So let's talk for just a second about your guiding principles, right? One of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. For instance, Batman never kills his enemies. He only ever brings them to Arkham Asylum. And I learned recently that Spider-Man actually doesn't punch his enemies all the way because he's afraid he'll kill them. So he always pulls his punches. So as we wrap up the interview, let's talk about the top 1 or 2 principles that you use regularly in your life. Maybe something you wish you'd known when you first started out building your own company.
For me, the one of the main things is about integrity and doing what you say you're going to do and say what you're going to do and do what you say. And so for me, that's really my guiding principle of trying to make sure that when I make commitments, when I promises, when I'm engaging with people, that I'm holding true to my word and doing that. And like everyone, clearly very fallible. And there's times I try to learn and get better and try to improve. And that's where this continuous improvement mindset comes as well, which is trying to harness and leverage from the past, but not get dragged down by it. Trying to leverage those things as lessons learned and then use those as my inspiration and drive to go forward and make a difference.
Yeah, I love that. And it's fascinating to me. And I know we mentioned before we got on the episode and started recording, one of the purposes of this show is to just show that most entrepreneurs are actually out there to make the world a better place. And I never, I sometimes skip around on the questions we ask on these interviews, but I never skip this question because it's really important to me. At some point, I'm going to put together like 400 plus of these like short clips of everyone answering that question. Because what's surprising to me is almost 95, 96, 97% of people that I ask that question to respond with some variation of integrity, right? As being their guiding principle for running their company. And I wouldn't have guessed that a few years ago when I started this podcast. But the more and more I've interviewed entrepreneurs from all over the world, the more you realize that hey, capitalism actually works because there's mutual trust, right? Because we're both providing value to each other. It's an equal exchange of value, and you can't have that equal exchange of value if you're not trustworthy, right? If you don't have integrity. And so integrity is like a baseline functional reason to how to operate in, or we can't work, right? We can't do what we're doing.
Exactly right. And I not original thought. I picked it up from someone, and I can't remember who it was, but this concept that try to live and be driven by clean fuels of integrity, innovation, impact, and not dirty fuels of fear, anxiety, jealousy, frustration. And so I try to think about it in that context is like, how do you, anything can work on dirty fuels for a little bit of time, but you're going to burn out, you're going to create damage, it's not going to last and not be sustainable for the long term. So what are those clean fuels and how do we get inspired and how do we do that? And integrity to me is at the basis of all that. Is making sure you're using that.
Yeah,
right.
and it's absolutely right. And there's always the stories of the entrepreneurs who are the villains, right? And sometimes they're just legitimately stories, and sometimes they're actual things. Right? Everyone's heard of Enron, right? But those things always get found out eventually, right? And they always crash and burn eventually, right? Because you can't actually operate in a real capitalist society without integrity as the baseline of what you're doing.
It's exactly right. It's exactly right. It's playing that long game, right? And knowing and have comfort when there's around you that are not sticking to your game and not lowering yourself to maybe where others are and keeping on the high road with comfort and confidence that there may be short-term things that you're leaving and short-term compromises or short-term benefits you could be leaving aside, but knowing that in the long run you're doing it the right way,
Awesome.
and you'll
Well,
succeed.
that is a wrap on our interview, and we almost nailed it, an hour on the dot. But I do finish every interview with a simple challenge I call the Heroes Challenge. And the Heroes Challenge is really to help us get access to stories we might not otherwise find on our own. So the question is simple. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine, and why do you think that they should come share their story with us here on the Hero Show? First person that comes to mind for you.
First person that comes to mind is a friend of mine, Josh, who he actually is working in a corporate world and a corporate job, but he's been through a fascinating journey of a couple of different careers, a car accident that was very devastating to him, and there's a resilience of recreating and continuing to grow and look for new opportunities and help coach and focus on others, right? And allow others to unlock their potential. So his entrepreneurial journey is really about creating content to help others as well and to, whether it's through workshops or hiring. And so I think that's the first one that comes to mind for me. Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll see if we can reach out, maybe get an introduction in. They don't always say yes, but when they do, sometimes we get cool stories to come on the show. So our send off, just like in comic books, there's always the crowd of people who are cheering and clapping for the acts of heroism, as a thank you for their work. So as we close, we want to know, where can people find you if they want your help in the future? Where can they light up the bat signal, so to speak, and say, hey, Phil, we have some things that you could help us with our products on our sustainability. But I think more importantly than where is, who are the right types of people or businesses to reach out?
Yeah. So I think for me, so our website is inspirenw.com. So it's inspired results. And it's really businesses that are maybe confused or struggling or looking for direction. They want a partner, they want a trusted partner and someone who's going to deal in reality. And so for me, the right fit client, the right engagement, and it's not about sales. My challenge, frankly, is I just want to solve problems and help people out, and monetizing it is always behind there. And so I think it's people that really want to learn, grow, think differently, maybe challenge some barriers that are in front of them. So again, it's inspirenw.com is our website for Inspired Results, and happy to speak with anyone and share anything I can.
Awesome. So Inspired NW, we'll make sure that the link for that is in the description below. Phil, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story with us here on the Hero Show. Do you have any final words of wisdom for my audience before we hit the stop record button?
Just a pleasure to join. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I wish everyone luck. And persistence is the key, right? And knowing and playing the long road, playing the long game, keeping integrity is the key to what you're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Phil. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Richard. Take care now.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Hero Show, where we work to shift the cultural narrative around entrepreneurship and celebrate the heropreneurs who make our world a better place. Don't forget to visit our website at theheroshow.tv, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. If you found value in our show, we'd truly appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or better yet, share it with a friend to help us spread the message of entrepreneurship as a force for good. Curious to learn more about the stories and insights of these incredible heropreneurs? Check out our in-depth interviews and resources on our website. Together, let's support and inspire the next generation of entrepreneurs as they embark on their own heroic journeys. Join us again next week for another episode of The Hero Show, where we'll continue to explore the world of heropreneurs, their superpowers, and the positive impact they bring to our lives. Until then, stay heroic.